Christine Marr at the Atlanta History Center in Atlanta, Georgia. The date is March 9th, 2004, and today I'm here to interview Mr. Braswell Deen. Mr. Deen, could you please introduce yourself by giving me your full name, spelling your name, your place and date of birth?
Thank you, Christine. My name is Braswell Deen Jr., B-R-A-S-W-E-L-L. The middle name is Drew, D-R-U-E. The last name is Deen with two E's, D-E-E-N, Jr., and I was born August the 16th, 1925 in McRae, Telfair County, Georgia.
Thank you very much. I'd like to take our story chronologically. Is there an outline that you'd like to proceed with?
Thank you, Christine. I think there are 8 steps that I would like to kind of discuss, and we'll zero in mostly on my military. Step 1 is where I was born in Telfair County. I'll mention in a minute a little about my father. He was president of the South Georgia Methodist College. And step 2 is Alma, Georgia. That's where we moved to, and he was elected to the United States Congress, and that's kind of where I grew up. Step 3 is Brunswick, where I graduated from school and went into the United States Marine Corps, and we'll come back to step 3 and zero in on Brunswick, Georgia. And step 4 is Athens, that's University of Georgia. That's after the Marine Corps activity. I went to law school there and went every summer and graduated and passed the bar exam about a year before I graduated. And we'll come back to that for just a moment or two. And then the next step is back to Alma, Georgia, where I grew up, practiced law, got married, and had 2 boys and so forth. We'll cover that a little bit. And then Governor Carl Sanders, who was my friend in the state legislature. I was there for 8 years and authored the Georgia Woman Jury Bill. Women could not serve on the jury in our state until 1953. That's the only claim to fame I might have. Anyway, he was elected governor and appointed me to the State Court of Appeals, and I stayed there about 26 years. So that'll be the step 7, step 6, I think. Step 8 is I retired from the court, and the last 13 years I've been doing what's called mediation and arbitration, alternative dispute resolution. I wrote a book on that. I'll hold that up in a few minutes. And then the last step, my wife passed away, and my boys, I have a doctor and a lawyer's sons, and I eloped with this lady, Marie Lovell. In a few minutes, maybe we can zero in on her, and I'd like for her to say a word, not now, but a little bit later. But we eloped and got married at the cloister at Sea Island, and we were dancing within a few minutes after our marriage.
I would like to now introduce Marie. Marie, would you kindly introduce yourself and spell your name as well, please?
Yes. My name is Marie Jones Lovell. I was married to John Lovell and for 50 years. And
thank you very much.
Are we still on now? Okay.
Mr. Deen, could you please begin with your birth and growing up in Telfair County?
Well, there's not too much to remember because when I was 4, we moved to Alma. But I would like to just tell you a couple of things that my father used to tell me when he was president of the college. He would gather all the teachers together, and he'd say, "Do you know why there's so much knowledge in college?" And they'd say, "No." And he said, "Well, the freshmen bring in more than the seniors carry away." Well, they didn't like that too much. And then he'd say, "Well, it's so nice to see everybody with so many degrees out here." He would say, "Some people live by degrees and other people die by degrees." But anyway.
Could you tell me the name of your father and the name of the college where he instructed?
My father was Braswell Deen Sr. I'm junior, and we have a son named the third who is a doctor. And he was the president of the South Georgia Methodist College. He attended Emory University. He worked his way through there many years ago. And then we moved to Alma. Any questions before we moved to, he bought him a newspaper in Alma. He said he had 3 children and couldn't earn enough with that presidential salary to raise his family. So he bought him a newspaper, and he got all the newspaper editors in the other parts of the district behind him, and was elected to the United States Congress when Roosevelt went in as president. He said he had to move to Washington and work for 1 month to get enough money to send for the family, and we all got in a Model T, the 3 children. My mother, she drove. We spent the night in Aiken, South Carolina, and Richmond, Virginia the next night. Finally got to Washington. Anyway, I'm jumping ahead now. In Alma, I joined the Boy Scouts, grew up there. We lived 6 months in Washington and 6 months in Alma, and that's about it. We moved on to Brunswick.
Could you tell me what years you lived in Alma at that time?
Okay, I was born in 25 and moved to Alma about 29 or 30. You'd hear a lot about the Hoover days and Depression back during those days. But we were in Alma until World War II, when my sister was working at the shipyard, and I went to put roofs on war apartments. And
Which shipyard would that be?
The Brunswick shipyard in Brunswick. We were building Liberty ships. Ironically, I rode on one of those Liberty ships way back around Guadalcanal in the South Pacific. But in any event, I was a roofer and a machinist, and my father worked at the shipyard. Everybody was trying to build ships and win the war.
Now, Brunswick is in Georgia?
That's in Glenn County, Georgia, about 100 miles east of Alma. It's about 50 miles south of Savannah and 60 miles north of Jacksonville.
Tell me, could you describe what you remember of the shipyard?
Okay, putting shingles on roofs first. I think that my knees are about worn out now. You have to squat down all day and nail tacks in the asphalt shingles. Worked on the propeller of the Liberty ship. That was, we had some older men. I was not old enough to get in the Army. I went to Jacksonville to try to join the Air Force, and they said, "You're too tall." I'm about 6'4.5". They said, "You won't fit in one of these little planes." So I went on into the Marine Corps from Brunswick.
And how old were you at this time?
Okay, I was about 17 out of high school, and as soon as I got 18 and could get into the military, I went to join the Marine Corps, and we can kind of zero in on that if you want to now. Came to Atlanta, and they put me on a train to New Orleans on out to San Diego. I had a friend in the Marine Corps. He was at Parris Island, South Carolina. I was hoping to join him. But in those days, we didn't even have a time to go home. We went straight from boot camp in San Diego, California to New Caledonia, which is pretty close to Australia. It's a French island. I had a milkshake there out of goat's milk. But when we got off the ship, we had a 30-mile hike, and I took a course in Japanese weapons. In case we found the weapons, we needed somebody who knew how to put them together and so forth. And from there, I went by Guadalcanal to a little island called Pavuvu, P-A-V-U-V-U. That's where we trained, the 1st Marine Division. Bob Hope came there one time with Francis Langford, I think. But we trained there. We had no plumbing. You'd soap up in a rain and hope that you'd get washed before the rain stopped.
What were you training for in Pavuvu?
Okay, we were all recruits. We had gotten out of boot camp. We were getting ready for the next assault. Turned out we didn't know where it would be. It turned out to be Pelileu, P-E-L-E-L-I-U, where we lost 80% of our people the first day. We had 45 in our platoon. There were 9 of us standing at the end of the day that were not killed or wounded. And of course that was, I write about that in one of my books. But anyway, so we trained about 6 or 8 months at Pavuvu and then went on to Pelileu, the assault there.
Could you tell me a little bit about an average training day? What role were you training to perform?
Okay, that's good. I was I was the tallest man usually in the platoon. They said, we'll use you as a watchtower. If they miss you, well, we'll be safe, you know. I carried a Browning automatic rifle. We call that a BAR. That's kind of a small machine gun with tripods, and you can lie down, and it has a drum in there, about 30 or 40 bullets in there. And anyway, we would take 30-mile hikes. We would get out and do calisthenics. The reveille was about 5 o'clock in the morning, and we were out on the trail. We'd put on our khaki and boot leggings, and we were either practicing the bayonet. They told us not had a new system. They said you don't go for their heart or head, you go for their hands. They call that the Biddle system. If you hit their hands, they'll drop their weapons. Anyway, we had rigorous training. When we got to New Caledonia, we had combat ranger training there, and when we hit Pelileu, we had, of course, BAR people, we had carbine people, we had M1s and flamethrowers and all this sort of thing. So we lost so many people at Pelileu. They don't write about it. You don't hear too much. You hear a lot about Iwo Jima and other. But we came back to Pavuvu. That's where we trained, and came in with a lot of new replacements, and started training them then. Well, the last battle of World War II was in Okinawa. And I was lucky on Pelileu, but not too lucky on Okinawa. I received some mortar in my left wrist, and they sent me then to, they did the operation underground on Okinawa, and they sent me to the hospital in Guam and San Francisco, San Diego, and in Hawaii before that, and then finally Charleston, South Carolina, when I first finally saw my parents for the first time after 2 years.
Were you able to communicate in any way with your family or friends during the time in
we had no telephones back then. I had one telephone call when I finally got back to Hawaii. I think they gave me when I was in the hospital there, and they said, you want to go to the dance? And I said, I can't dance, but I said, can I use the phone? And I got one call when I got to San Francisco, and once I got to the Balboa Hospital in San Diego, then of course I called and communicated. They didn't know, they knew I was hit, but they didn't know where or how bad or whatever.
Had they been notified by the federal government?
They were notified a regular letter about, your son had been wounded in action, but they didn't know how bad or whatever. So anyway, I'm lucky to be here today. I'm no hero. The real heroes did not come back. And I'm just one of the lucky ones in the military. I have some medals over here that a lot of the veterans wear, but I've had them, I think, on mothballs for about 40 years.
Would you like to hold them up and explain to me what you have there?
Well, there's some different things here. This is called the Purple Heart here, and this probably will go to one of my two sons if they want it. I'm not sure they want it, but that is next to the Congressional Medal of Honor. That means you've been shot at and hit. These other battle weapons, it's been 50 years, so I'm South Pacific citations for Pelileu and Okinawa and good conduct, sharpshooter. There are too many of these to kind of go into now. There's two other medals that I treasure. This, when I was in the legislature for 8 years, back in 1951 to 1960. The JCs of Georgia select the 5 outstanding young men in Georgia every year, and I was fortunate to receive that medal.
And what year was that?
That was about 1956.
Okay.
I guess that was probably for sponsoring and passing the Georgia Woman Jury Bill. This medal is called the Good Citizens Medal, given by the Sons of American Revolution in Georgia, SAR. I spoke to them. I think they give one of these a year, and they may have made a mistake in giving it to me, but I treasure it very much. I told my son, I said, all my medals there and $1.25 buy you a cup of coffee one day. But I do treasure those medals there.
So once you arrived back to San Diego and Hawaii, could you tell me what happened from there?
Okay, Hawaii, I was in the Pink Veterans Hospital there for about a week. They put me on a boat to San Francisco, and then they...
Do you have any recollections of the hospital and your experience there?
I do. I went back to Hawaii and saw the hospital, and as I said, they wanted me to go dance there, and they made a mistake. You know, I had a cast on my left arm where there's a mortar went through, and they took it out on the other side of this left wrist, and they put me in the amputation ward by mistake. And you know, everybody had lost a leg, an arm there, and then the next day they came and got me. They said, "We put you in the wrong place." I'm delighted to know that. But I remember San Francisco on to San Diego. I remember the Balboa Hospital well.
Could you describe that, please?
And that's just there's a big Balboa zoo, and the Balboa Hospital. And the hospital, the first time I'd really had some lady nurses there. We didn't see any women or nurses for 2 years. We had medical people over in Okinawa and Pelileu, and in any event, they finally put me on a train back to South Carolina, where I was pretty close to being home then. My parents came and got me and took me home. So
were they still in Alma, Georgia?
they were in Alma, and they were glad to see me, and I was glad. You know, the war on the only furlough I ever had was after I got home out of the hospitals. The war ended, and I remember in Alma, you know, people would ride around with their automobiles and toot their horn and this sort of thing. So the war was over, and then within 2 weeks I was going to University of Georgia. I could move on into that now, or whatever you say.
Were many of your friends from Alma, Georgia also involved in the war effort?
A good friend of mine who was an attorney, Barry Jones, was in the Marine Corps, but he was in a different division, and he went to Iwo Jima, and I didn't get there.
Could you tell me your division in the Marine Corps?
My division was the 1st Marine Division. That was the 1st Division, and also recently I followed them over in Afghanistan and Iraq, the 1st Marine Division, and they say that they call us the raggedy-ass Marines. In any event, one man stepped on the ship there, and the sailor said, "Did you bring any souvenirs with you?" And he said, "Yes, the only souvenir I brought is my posterior. I got it out." And so anyway, he was just happy to get home.
And your rank when you...
I wish you hadn't mentioned that. I was a private for a while in a PFC, and finally my rank was corporal. I was an acting sergeant during Okinawa because most of our sergeants and lieutenants were deceased. You know, they'd bring in, maybe one night we'd lose 15 people that day. They'd bring in 15 new men, so we advanced. The corporals became platoon leaders, and I was helping to lead our platoon on Okinawa. Had I had the rank, I'd have been on up master sergeant or something like that. But in any event, that's what happened.
Could you describe more your experience in Okinawa and your experience in Parris Island?
Okay, now Okinawa was the last battle of World War II. Many thought that we had to invade Japan, but the atomic bomb came along and blasted Japanese, and they surrendered there. And so after I got out of all the hospitals, they did send me back to Philadelphia, and then on back to Parris Island, where I was discharged, honorable discharge. They asked me if I wanted to be in the reserve, and I said, no, I think I'll go home. And so I went on to University of Georgia after that.
Could you describe any memories of Parris Island?
Parris Island was kind of like San Diego, you know, just a lot of troops out there drilling, and I didn't stay there but, you know, about a week, and so all I remember is barracks and food and just marking time until we were discharged.
And Okinawa, what do you remember visually about your experience there?
The first time we landed on Okinawa, our platoon and our regiment went to an airfield called the Yantan Airport, and we guarded the entire airport there. And the Japanese did not realize that we were there. They landed 2 or 3 of their planes there when we had it guarded, so we'd pull them out, you know. And then we went on in the northern part of Okinawa, cleaned that up, and came south, and that's where things got real tough. That's where I finally got.
In what way?
Well, a lot of firepower. You know, people bombing you and people shooting knee mortars at you, and you know, you're lucky if you had 45 in the platoon, maybe a dozen would get killed in one day. So that's why I call that tough.
Why would you say that the casualties were so high?
Well, that was the Japanese last stand. They didn't meet us on the beach in Okinawa like they did at Pelileu. They met us on the beach there, and we were surrounded on Pelileu, and I describe it in my book that if we hadn't had some tanks to come up to help us, that they would have killed all of us. But on Okinawa, the Japanese were not on the beach. We just landed on April 1st, April Fool's Day, 1945 is when we landed in Okinawa. But they made their last stand in the southern part of Okinawa. In fact, we were defeating them so bad they were jumping off the cliff and committing a hara-kiri and suicide because a lot of them didn't want to surrender. That's why it was.
Did you witness that?
Well, I witnessed everything till I got to a place called the Wana Draw, which is along close to the Shuri Castle.
Could you spell that? Do you know this?
S-H-U-R-I is Shuri. That's a castle they had in the middle of the island now. Wana is W-A-N-A. That's a draw, a big hill. That's where I got hit. There was a place called Naha. N-A-H-A was the capital of Okinawa. And alongside of that, in the middle of the island, Naha was on one coast, Yonabaru, Y-O-N-A-B-R-U-G-H, I think, was on the other coast, and Shuri Castle was in the middle. And that's kind of the area I got hit. But they fought on. I read about it, and then when they, at the final thing, they started jumping off the cliffs, committing suicide. I could point to 2 or 3 books I've written on all this, if you would like me to kind of do that now.
Certainly.
All right, I've written 4 books, and the 3rd book I wrote is called Trial by Combat. The last 2 chapters is 13 and 14, I believe. Next to the last chapter is on Pelileu. It outlines in detail kind of what I'm rambling through now. And then the last chapter is on Okinawa. Now, another book that I wrote is called Roots and Origins. Where did we come from? That takes on evolution versus non-evolution, and we won't spend too much time on that, although that's kind of a hot topic now. The first book I wrote is called Georgia Appellate Judiciary. That takes on all the judges of the courts, beginning with General Oglethorpe in Savannah and coming on up to, I think the first mediator in Georgia was named Kusapana Kisa. She was a woman who mediated cases between Oglethorpe and the Yamacraw Indians, Tamachichi. Anyway, I cover a photograph of all the judges, State Supreme Court, Court of Appeals, with a photograph and a 1-page biography in that book. The second book I wrote is on how to settle your cases out of court. A lot of people say, you know, I don't really care whether I win or lose, I just want to get rid of this case. And we do it around the table, friendly, and when they get through, they shake hands. And this is a new thing that's sweeping America. It's called ADR. So I've written, I didn't write all the other books, but I like history, and my father was in the United States Congress, and I compiled all his speeches, the Dean history, and just a lot of poetry he wrote, I wrote, my sister wrote, and that's not a bad book if you a member of the Dean clan. All right, this book, my father's book, is U.S. Congressman Braswell Deen Sr., Quips, Quotes, Quirks, Queries, and Quests. All right, now this is a book of my speeches, 18 states and different things. This is called Judges, Judgments, Jottings, Joys, Journeys, Jests, Jungle, Jingles, and Jabberwocky. This covers everything for my grandsons that might want to read this sort of thing. Now, my mother's sister was, we called her Big Sister. She had no children. She taught school in Tampa for 40 years and wrote poems every day. And so when she passed away, I said, these poems are so valuable that all of her heirs and her people need a copy of this. In fact, I put one in the college where she went to college. I'm trying to think of the name of it now. Anyway, in the libraries and so forth. That's called Annie Smith Hartman's Jingles, Jottings, Joys, and Journeys. And you could spend 2 or 3 days reading this book. But anyway, this cap here is when I was commander of the Veterans of Foreign Wars in Alma. We had a group of veterans, like the American Legion and this sort of thing. And of course, when I retired from the court, I bought this hat that says retired Marine, maybe a tired Marine. This hat, the emblem of Guadalcanal is on the sleeve of every 1st Marine Division. That's our trademark, is Guadalcanal. And I'm learning to play the piano now after I got remarried here after 80, at age 80 we eloped. And so the first song that I played was a United States Marine hymn. But this is just some memorabilia that I've accumulated. Could I kind of cover quickly when I went to University of Georgia, maybe?
Yes.
All right. After the Marine Corps, I went on to University of Georgia and was president of the Pi Kappa Alpha Fraternity and vice president of the legal fraternity there. Played a lot of softball and volleyball, and did not get married. But I went to Alma after I graduated from law school, back home, and 2 weeks after I got there, I was running for the state representative from Bacon County and was elected by 96 votes. And thereafter, my name was on the ballot for 33 years, and about 20 years I had no opposition. My father said, "Son, I'd hate to have a job nobody else wants." I said, "Well, I'm glad I have no opposition." But in any event, after the University of Georgia, I went back and practiced law and ran for state representative, president of the Alma Lions Club, represented the bank there and a lot of the corporation's business, and that's where I was cited as one of the 5 outstanding young men of the year, and authored the Georgia Woman Jury Bill. Actually, I was one of the things I'm proud of. I was president of the Alma Better Hometown Community Club, and we won first place in the state of Georgia as being the most progressive city in the state that year in our population bracket and in all population brackets. All right, from Alma then, Carl Sanders, I said, placed me on the Court of Appeals. I stayed there about 26 years. I was chief judge for a while, and they said I wrote about 4,000 published opinions that are in the law books of Georgia, and participated in about 14,000 cases, with other judges. Sometimes we had a panel of judges, 3 judges on each panel. And then sometimes we had a whole court case where we had all 9 judges had to consider cases. So anyway, that's where I wrote my first book on the Georgia appellate judiciary. All right, go ahead.
Did you ever issue an opinion on integration?
On integration, the federal courts had already were, in that area, and yes, we've had some that it's too ugly to talk about the names that people call each other, and I think that our court upheld all the laws of, the integration, and I was kind of a little liberal then. I started off as a Democrat. I got on the court, I became neutral. That is, you can't be on either party. Then after I got off the court, I kind of became a Republican. Now I've evolved into an independent. But then, all right, now after I retired from the court, I stayed there about 26 years, retired at midnight, December 31st, 1990. That is, I fulfilled my 6-year term. And then for 13 years after I retired, my wife passed away. And we got married down in Alma. She's from Blackshear. Jean Deen, Jeanbuiedeen. She passed away, and for 13 years I tried to help the courts settle cases out of court. That is, I think I did about 500 mediations and about 450 arbitrations, binding arbitrations. We've had the AFL and CIO fly in from Pittsburgh and Arizona, and big cases through the American Arbitration Association and other groups.
Could you cite some of those cases?
Well, that's been a long time. You're talking about the mediation, and actually mediation cases you can't cite because everybody has to sign an oath of confidentiality, so you can't discuss what went on at mediation. And arbitration, I better not cite. All I know is the Hilton hotels of the world. I found out the people who own the Hilton hotels are from Kuwait. They were being sued, I think, by the AFL-CIO. They had a big convention in Atlanta, and these rooms all over Atlanta were reserved. The Hilton hotels, every room they had. I think the labor people called off the convention at the last minute, so we had a big lawsuit involving millions of dollars on who should get what. And so I think I held in favor of the Hilton hotels there. But in any event, no, I don't remember the name of all these cases there on all attorneys' computers in Georgia and in the law books. But there's no two cases alike, and that was my big contribution is in the ADR was trying to continue further. That was one of the most pleasant careers. I think I've had 4 or 5 careers. One as a lawyer, of course, in the military. That's kind of a career. That was kind of a sad situation, but I'm always proud to say that I was in the United States Marine Corps.
Sad in what way?
Well, Governor Zell Miller wrote a book. He said, everything I've ever learned, I learned from Mama in the United States Marine Corps. He covered in his book that he was in the jail one night, and he said, I figured I better do better, so he joined the Marine Corps. It's a real honor to have, you see a lot of your friends killed. That's bad. But nevertheless, we were fighting to defend America. As I told my son, we could be talking Japanese or German had we not defended. They knocked Hawaii out and they threatened California. And we haven't had a war on the lands here in America, I think, since the Civil War, or the War of Northern Aggression, if you permit me to call that. Anyway, all right, my last step now, you can go back and pick up any question you want to, was my last one is called Cumming, Georgia. That's where the best looking widow and the nicest widow I could find was Marie Jones Lovell, became dean, and she has a story. I told her, I said, we've been knowing each other a long time, and both of our spouses are deceased. And I said, I don't drive at nighttime, and I said, I might come courting on Saturday or Sunday. She said, well, come on, So when I got there, I had my briefcase, and we do a lot of dancing, and so if you would let her just tell one event that might be appropriate, and then we'll come back, okay?
I prefer if you could go ahead.
All right. Well, you know, I got there with my briefcase, and she locked the door, and she said, "Now, we're gonna dance after a while." And I said, "Fine." I said, and they opened up my briefcase, and I had toothbrush and toothpaste, and she said, "What's that all about?" And I said, "Well, you promised me lunch, you know, and I don't like to." She said, "Okay." Then she saw a shirt in my briefcase. She said, "What's that for?" And I said, "Well, when I dance a lot, I perspire, you know." And I said, "I kind of might change my shirt after a while." She looked at that and she said, "That's okay," but she said, "If you've got your pajamas in there, you better get out of here." In any event, we got married, we eloped, and we didn't invite anyone. We told our children where we were. She has 2 children, I have 2.
Could you share the names of all the children, please?
Marie's oldest daughter is named Carolyn Hutchinson. She does interviews at the radio station down in Prattville, Brown. It's so pretty close to Montgomery. She's very talented, and she's an artist, and her son is John. Her name is Carolyn, Carolyn, or whatever. Anyway, her son is John Lovell III. He has an airplane, a motorcycle, and a boat. He's not semi-retired, but he has 3 darling children, one of whom is in Iraq now, and in the Rangers. And of course, I have, her daughter has a grandchild named Misha, and she's out in Montana. So I have 2 sons, one doctor's in Michigan at Providence Hospital, north of Detroit, and I have another son.
His name, please?
Sandra. My doctor's son is the same as mine, except he's Braswell Deen III. The lawyer's son is named after Governor Sanders. I put Sanders on him when he was born. I was operating and handling Carl Sanders' South Georgia political campaign. So he's a lawyer in Marietta. He married a girl from Pennsylvania, Linda Klobe, Klobe, and they have 2 sons. One is Alexander Buie Deen, Alexander Buie Deen, and the last son is Jackson Braswell Deen, named after his grandfather. That turned out to be me. So that's about it. Unless you have some other questions, you can jump around, and we'll go from there.
Yes, I'd like to go back, if I can, and get a few more details on your wartime experience.
Okay.
I'd like to get a sense of your feelings, your emotions as you joined the Marines throughout your combat experience and at the time when you were honorably discharged. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Okay, now when I first joined the Marines, you know, that was a new experience. And the drill instructor, we call them DIs, they try to scare you, I think. They said, all right, everything in your pockets, put on the table, your pocket knife, your keys, anything you got, your wallets, put them in an envelope and you're going to mail them home. From now on, you're mine.
How'd that make you feel?
Well, that's a little scary. They said, he called us out there and said, now forget about your family. I don't want you thinking about home. We're going to concentrate on close order drill, washing your own clothes with a bucket and a scrub brush. I was always on the point, the tall man. I had a squad leader, and you know, like let's see what it used to be, 1, 2, 3. Let's see, I had a home but I left. I had a home but I left. I had a wife and so many kids but I left. You're right. So we would focus on close order drill. That was scary, but I was in platoon 1000. Platoon 999 was right behind us, and 101 was in front of us. But in any event, we got on the board ship. That was quite a experience, crossing the equator. I think it was scallywag and I forgot. Let's see. When you cross the equator, you become a scallywag or pollywog. You had to eat. They initiated you. You had to eat you had to chew up a dead fish. We let us spit it out, but we were seasick by that time. But when we got to New Caledonia, we're going to march your sea legs off now with a 30-mile hike. Well, you know, then I think 3 days I helped guard a hotel called Hotel du Palais, a French hotel. I think 2 weeks on Japanese weapons, 2 or 3 weeks on Ranger training, and off to Pavuvu to join the 1st Marine Division. I was in K Company. All this is in my book. K Company, 3rd Battalion, 1st Regiment, 1st Marine Division. We were proud. We had leggings on our big, not boots, but big shoes, and they gave us a weapon. We had to carry that. They said, no, you got to sleep with that weapon if it's not clean. They inspected those weapons every day. We did exercises. We get up at 4:30 and 5. We'd march everywhere. When we got on the ships to go land on Pelileu, I was in the first wave, and we were in these little motorboats. Forgotten what they call them. I'll think of it in a minute. But anyway, we also landed in something called alligators sometime. But when you smell the smoke, the coconut trees are all burning. Bombs, you see people flying through the air. That maybe some boats have been hit. You see Marines for the first time killed right before your eyes. You can smell the odor of death. And when we got there, they were getting hit all everywhere. We finally got to a tank trap. And I got out in front of the tank trap, but we didn't get any further because we had so few people left. And finally, our medical...
How did you feel at that point? Was it terrifying?
At that point, it was 110 degrees. It was so hot. We had no water. We filled our canteens. We had 2 canteens, a backpack, our weapons, and plenty of ammunition, hand grenades, and we had only a few prunes and a little K-ration there, just nothing hard to eat.
What about a K-ration? Could you tell me what a K-ration is?
K-ration had some cheese, a little piece of K-ration was about as big as my hand here, and it had a little cheese and some prunes and 2 or 3 other things. When we got some sea rations, that little a can of sausage or a can of soup, we'd trade. Somebody said, I want the soup, you take the sausage. But we only had K-rations. We were surrounded literally by the Japanese. 2 of my friends said they played dead one time because the Japanese came through killing everybody. And we finally got out of that tank trap just before dark. Our tanks rolled up. I'm from the south, but I was glad to see those Sherman tanks roll up, and they commenced firing while we kind of got back to the water.
What were the Sherman tanks?
Sherman tanks was the old type tanks. They're named after General Sherman, and they could fire. Usually the Marines would walk behind the tanks and tell them which way to go, and maybe say fire at 3 o'clock or 10 o'clock and this sort of thing. We would help the tanks. We worked together. But they saved our life. Now, of course, the next morning I outline in my book where my weapon quit functioning, and then I got a M1 rifle, and our entire company was down to about 18 or 20 out of several hundred. We hung on for 2 or 3 days and got some relief. And after that, we were no longer, somebody said, where's the 1st Regiment? They said, there is no regiment. It's just a few stragglers, just a few of us left. But
tell me how you felt then.
I felt then? Well, the 2nd or 3rd day, there were so many Japanese bodies out in front of something called the Point. Their bodies began to swell, and you could smell. The odor was horrendous. The odor of the burning, still burning. We would use fire. We would, flamethrowers. We came to a cave, and we give them a little ochikato yame shimpai fukonage nichishe shanshi nichishe. Then that's 1, 2, 3, 4 nichishe shanshi. To come out of there by the time I count 4, a lot of times they'd run out.
Could you tell me what you just said? Is that Japanese?
That's Japanese. I took a little Japanese course so that you can talk to them. When I got home, I learned something. Let's see. Tamakata Hizashi Mimima Kuchihana, that's a little different, but the first I gave you is come out of the cave with your hands up. Now that's in my book too. I explain what it means. And I cannot talk fluent Japanese because I never got to Japan. Okinawa was about 200 or 300 miles south of Japan, and we were knocking on the door to get ready to invade Japan, but they surrendered. Yes, it was horrendous. Every night we had two in a hole. One of us would stay awake while the other one slept, and then we'd take turns because they may charge you with bayonets. They were coming at us with bayonets, hand grenades. They came through the water to get behind us. I had one friend named Fred Fox who was bayoneted 6 times.
Do you remember where he was from?
Texas. I communicate with him now, and I saw him. He has a tremendous beard now. They bayoneted him 6 times, but he survived. We got him up there the next morning and put him on a stretcher, and so we kept up. I used to attend the 1st Marine Division anniversary meetings in Las Vegas or Indianapolis or wherever we had them. At that time, there were only about a dozen that I knew, but there'd be thousands of them from other companies and other regiments and from the 1st Marine Division. So Fred Fox and I, but now there's only about 6 or 8 of us left because some of them are dying. They say 3,000 of us are dying off every day. So I'm fortunate to be here.
Do you still get together with those 6 or 8?
Well, I did until the last year or two, and I've had one knee replacement, and my other knee is kind of use a walking cane, and just don't like to travel as much. So we send Christmas cards and talk on the telephone, and we may get together again.
Could you cite the names that you remember of that group?
Okay, Odell Evans is the #1 man because of the 9 of us in our platoon of 46 that did not get killed or wounded, Odell and I were 2 of the 9, and we went on to Okinawa where we had a lot of replacements, and I was wounded there, and along with the other 7 or 8. Odell made both of them without a wound. He was the only one in our platoon that made Pelileu and Okinawa invasions without getting hit or killed. It's
where he's from, please?
Odell, Odell Evans, Evans. He used to be from Oklahoma. I think we nicknamed him Okie. But he lives out in Tusawana or something in California. I don't know, it's probably not in my book. But Odell Evans and Joe Dariano, he came to Atlanta to see me when I called him. I said, I finally found you. That was after maybe 10 years.
Could you spell Dariano?
Okay, he changed it. It used to be, when we were in the Marine Corps, it was D with an accent and a capital A, Ariano. He's from Italy. Dariano, D-A-R-I-A-N-O. But then when I saw him, when I found him, there was no apostrophe, and the A was little a. I said, Joe, you've changed your name. He said, well, it got too complicated using that apostrophe. So he's from Ohio, Tiffin, T-I-F-F-I-N. He'd come to see me in Atlanta. We'd go golfing and spend some time together. And others, like Mel Haig, he and I played volleyball together. He said, you were tough on the volleyball. I said, well, I could reach you over the net. We had we had so many coconut trees, and coconuts would drop out, and you'd almost have to watch out. You'd get killed if a coconut hit you. But Joe Daly was my squad leader. He's down in Naples, Florida. But Fred Fox from Texas and my medical friend Howard Jenkins, I put in my book that he helped save my life on Pelileu. He came up and got me and said, we're getting out of here. And I said, man, if you hadn't come and got me, I'd have been gone. And that was when the tanks came up. They made the decision to pull out, and I was up there in front of where they were, and they said, come on back. I said, okay, I can get out of here. All right. Darling, Bill Darling, D-A-R-L-I-N-G. Now, he helped save my life. On Okinawa, I was hit. They tried to give me a shot, and I said, I don't like needles, so I lay on a canvas and put me in and they were going to take me back, and they told Mr. Darling, they said, you take him back, make sure he gets back safe. But we almost got killed going back, and I cite what he told me in his letter. he said, I didn't think we were going to make it. He was rougher and rougher going back than he was on the front line. But there were shells falling all around us there. So that's kind of how I felt. Now, my wife's Marie, the beautiful Marie over here, has a brother who was in the Philippines, and he does not discuss the military. There's some people that just don't want to handle it. I think I can handle it all right. I'm doing okay now, and I wrote it down mainly for my sons and grandsons, maybe would know where we were and what happened. But I think about it every day of my life. And I put that in the book. You think about a lot of things. When I moved to Washington, I was a marble champion. I could shoot marbles better than anybody up there. And a few things that you can do well in life, but you go back to the Marine Corps. I can never forget it.
Could you describe a little bit about the actual living conditions and the entertainments, maybe when you first came to New Caledonia, what you did with the guys for some fun?
Okay, everybody gets a bunk, and you got to hang your rifle. And there was so many mosquitoes there.
How many bunks in a barracks?
Eight in a tent. Eight in a tent. Now we're in the barracks. They'd have 40 or 50. Through boot camp, we stayed in barracks. But got overseas, we had these tents of 8. And you hung your weapon. Don't let it hit the ground, or you got to clean it, and they'll fine you. They'll put you in the brig if you drop that weapon. We had to keep our weapons clean. We had mosquito nets that go up over our bed a little bit with 4 sticks and prevent you from getting eaten up at night. We had land crabs that would come in, rats, big rats that come in your tent at night. And we had no plumbing, so that's why you have to get up at night and somebody deliberately sound like a monkey or something, and because they jack the rippers out, and so you have to be careful. But when I got to the tent in Pavuvu, that's where we train. That's where you get to know everybody real well, because we lived together. We won first place as having the cleanest tent. And I used to write a letter to a friend named Jean Lyde, L-I-D-E. She actually was a roommate of the lady I finally married, Jean Bowie.
Was she in Alma, Georgia?
No, they're from Jacksonville. But anyway, the Jean Lyde wanted to get married when I got back, but I wanted to go to the University of Georgia, and I didn't have any money to get married, so she married somebody else. But those tents, you could see the moon in the top of the tent. There were 8 of us in there, and I can tell you I go in the tent. I was on the left, Joe Daly was next, and Joe Dariano, and a boy named, I can't think of his name. He used to call me Dean the Bean. He said, "You're a string bean. You're a tall man." I said, "You say tall or bald?" Anyway, I had a head of blonde hair at that time, but you get to love those boys, and you'll always remember who you room with, and particularly the ones that got shot. A little boy named Byron. He was about 5'2" or 3". We called him Little Byron. And he was killed on Pelileu, and we had a boy named Holden. He was from Tennessee. He had buck teeth there. Somebody used to say, he could eat an apple through a picket fence. Let's don't talk about that. We had a boy named Dolan. We had a lot of people killed. That's the next tent to you. Maybe half the people in that tent were killed. But when we got back from Pelileu, they'd bring in new replacements, and I had to get back from Pelileu. I was in the tent with 5 new people I didn't know. We had one man married. He was about 23. We called him Papa, because nobody else was married. And all of them would want to know about the green hell of Guadalcanal or what happened on Pelileu. And I said, no, I'd rather not talk about it now. We talk about it later. And so we had to train these people and get ready for Okinawa. And then we finally caught a ship. I named the ships in my books. We never did see Pavuvu again, because I got hit on Okinawa, and that's when they flew me to Guam, and then from by boat there to Hawaii, 2 or 3 days in Hawaii, by boat to San Francisco, by train to San Diego, by train back to Columbia, South Carolina, by car to Alma, by train again to Philadelphia, by train again to Parris Island, and then home. 2 weeks later, I was at the University of Georgia, ready for a new life. But there were a lot of comrades over there, people I didn't know, but other military people.
Did you use the GI Bill?
If it was not for the, they paid us $1 a day when we were in the Marine Corps, except when we were on the front lines, we got $2 a day. And I point in my book, for 2 years I didn't spend a dime. I got 690 something, it's in the book. When I got discharged, I thought I was rich. That and the GI Bill was I had a combination, a degree, a business degree and a law degree combined, thanks to the GI Bill. That put me through. So, any questions you have now? I've covered 8 phases from the time I was born to I'm in my last plateau now with my second wife, and we're having a lot of fun dancing. She's teaching me how to cook. We play the piano together.
How long have you been playing piano?
Well, only since I got married. I saw it on TV, and it said Scott Houston, the piano man, said, "I'll have you playing on a flash." I bought his book, and every time I went to the lodge at Sea Island not too long ago and played on their Steinway piano. I just play every time I see a piano I want to play. Do you have one here? Do you know? In this building?
Not that I know of.
Okay.
Wish we did. Wish we had one here.
Mm-hmm.
Any other stories you'd like to cover or details you'd like to add, particularly about your wartime experience?
Okay, let's see, the wartime
About 5 minutes.
Okay, well, the trip on the train, it took us about 2 weeks.
Was it all soldiers?
All soldiers, people that didn't know, you know. We were all headed for Parris Island, all Marines coming out of Atlanta. Some of them they'd shipped to Parris Island for Marines. The ones that went to Air Force would go there, the Navy would head, the Coast Guard, but we were headed. I had a friend named Swazo. I think I met him, we picked him up in Arizona, and that was one of the highlights of military on Pelileu. We had the Navajo Indians with their language as a code which the Japanese could never figure out. All of our communications were in Navajo. Of course, I didn't know Navajo, but the Navajo Indians that used as communicators, the Japanese, we could break their code, but they never could break the Navajo code. That was, we finally got to, you know, it's a big thing when you get to San Diego and have to take off all your clothes and everything you got and mail it home. That's a new day issue, you know, like going to prison almost. What size shoe do you wear? What socks? How long are your trousers? How much do you weigh? And but that was a moment that they trained us well. I didn't take any furloughs. I think they let us go to San Diego once or twice. But the big things was Pelileu and Okinawa. I point out on Okinawa, we finally lost 96%. That Odell Evans was the only one in my platoon that made both invasions without being harmed. And Pelileu, I say, was the first 2 or 3 days was worse than Okinawa, although I didn't get killed or hit on Pelileu. I call it the 48 hours of hell. Okinawa was drawn out. We landed there April the 1st, and I was not wounded until May the 21st. So I was there a month and 3 weeks fighting our way down. Everybody, a lot of people getting shot and killed and new replacements, so that by the time I got hit, I only knew just a few people in the platoon because everybody was new and they were petrified. They were coming out of the States to join us right there in the middle of the battle. And I know that was terrible for them, because if we told them to move out over here, we were kind of helping guide the platoon then, because the ones of us, even though we're corporals or privates or whatever we were, we had to help take over with experience. And so I point out on Okinawa, 96% of the entire company that landed there, adding all the replacements that came into our company, and how many were left at the time the war was over. 96% casualties on Okinawa, 80% on Pelileu. It was devastating. But I'm thankful that I'm here. I'm not a hero, but there were a lot of heroes that were left. And I'm sure a lot of mothers and fathers that were grieved. That's about it, unless you have other questions. I still wish Marie would say a couple of words. Anyway, we teach each other things, and right now I can fix the best cornbread and biscuits and collard green. She taught me a lot. I don't think I was scared, but I'm not too sure I did too good. I don't know.
Mr. Deen, thank you very much for your interview today.
Thank you, Christine.
We greatly appreciate it.
I saw Parris on your table there.